The green summer fade and winter draw near. My Lord, in your presence I live without fear. Through tempest, through snows, through turbulent tide, the touch of your hand is my strength and my guide.
You have good karma. I give you my unconditional love.
I give you my unconditional love. I love you for not what you can give me, but as your spiritual son and disciple.
I ask for no riches that death can destroy. I crave only thee, your love and your joy. I ask for no riches that death can destroy. I crave only thee, your love and your joy. The dancers will pass, the singing must end. I welcome the darkness with you for my friend.
Namaste. So, today's subject is how to conquer fear. And the video clip that we just watched from a trailer from the movie The Answer discusses the answer. How do we conquer fear? Why are we afraid? What is it that we're afraid of? Fear exists mentally, physically, and spiritually. And when I say mentally, I mean emotionally. Most people consider fear to be part of the instinct for fright and flight. And people who perceive the human condition as animalistic and strictly a part of physical nature explain that we're afraid of bodily harm. It's an instinct that protects us. If you are not afraid of dangerous situations, then you may kill yourself unnecessarily. If you're not afraid of wild animals, then you might be eaten. And the instinct for survival pushes us forward in that way. But we've also seen that mankind lives beyond the human condition outwardly. And the consciousness that we experience is not just emotion. There's a part of us inside that transcends that. We call it spirit. We describe it as the soul. The soul has a perception that's different, that although connected to and animates the experience that we have through the mind and the emotions. And it's interesting, you would think that people would be most afraid of pain, death. But the number one fear that's been studied is the fear of speaking in public. Public speaking is the greatest fear that people have. And that it's interesting that it connects to our sense of self, ego self, personality self. It's connected to our sense that if other people think that we're foolish, then that's like the worst thing that could ever happen. I remember my growing up, my mother, she was so concerned about what other people thought. What will the neighbors think? What will my friends think? What will society think? She had this real fear and acted in ways that it was quite clear that she were not her preference. But she acted to make sure that there was no appearance of that would lower the opinion, other people's opinion of her. And the thing is that the chances of other people really caring about it are so slim that it's an unnecessary fear. And this is one of the realities about fears that we have. And many people have a variety of fears. Fears of confined spaces, fears of being in high places, a fear of failure. So I thought we would journey down physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual for a moment here. Kriyananda had an amazing lack of fear. Even as a man in university, there was this prankster going around the university, and on April Fool's Day, or Halloween, I think it was, Kriyananda was in his room alone. There was a big window, and it was dark. He couldn't see clearly out, but he saw a shadowy shape of a person appear at the window with a gun. And he just sat there. And he said that in his mind, he says, oh, this is interesting. Let's see what happens. And the gun went off, bang. And he went, everything's okay. He didn't have that. The thing is that fear, no matter where it comes from, the anticipation of what can go wrong is much greater than what actually will go wrong. Once when I was a new father unexpectedly, because I married a woman who had 2 children from a previous marriage, and one was 10 and the other one was 12. And the 10-year-old, we went to this amusement park in California, not far from Silicon Valley, and we went on this ride that's like a Ferris wheel that went up, but it was kind of at an angle, and it had these little like bird cages, and they would swing, but they would go way up, and while it was going up and down, they would freely swing. And you just sit, there's no seat belts, you just sit inside on a little bench that goes all the way around. And everybody was happy waiting in line. But as soon as we got in the cage, everything was fine. But as soon as it started to move, Christy, the little girl, she just absolutely just became petrified. And she started to scream, and uncontrollably, and it was like, because she was afraid, she became afraid, and so what you can now learn something very practical about what do you do when somebody becomes hysterical like that? They become uncontrollably out of control. Well, pranayama. So, Christy, take a deep breath. Ready? Go in the nose, out the mouth. Take a deep breath. And when people are breathing deeply and consciously, it sucks all the energy away from the other stuff. It's hard for them to multitask in that time. So what you want to do is you redirect their energy in another direction. So, the idea that the answer is the spiritual life that we follow. The answer that we find in the yoga teachings applies to every aspect of life, mental, physical, and spiritual, and directly can help us with fear. So in this case, pranayama, a little bit of breathing exercise, and as soon as you do it, you feel calmer. But it also withdraws your energy from going in the direction of fear. So if you have a fear of something, what you need to, there's a couple ways. One is to redirect your mind. In other words, you just don't think about it. So if you're afraid of going on the train, then you just occupy your mind, and you won't have energy for doing that. And we often say it's helpful to face your fears. Kriyananda faced potential fear when he allowed himself just to stay in position when the fellow shot the gun. But many people run from fear, run from things that scare them. And of course, then they build it up in their minds, and they build up a habit, a belief, a mental mechanism that I am afraid of this. And that mechanism, interestingly enough, has power. And that mechanism creates a power that will make the fear larger in your mind, as well as creating an energy flow that draws that circumstance to you. So things that you're afraid of often will come to you when they might not have if you hadn't been so afraid of them. When I was a young man, I was involved in surfing. And surfing is scary. Now, it may not look scary when you see somebody riding a wave. It looks like fun and exciting. But the thing is, when you get out there, those waves are big. And the thing is, when waves, they're oftentimes people describe nature as, when nature is being strong, nature is fury. But nature is not angry at anybody. Nature's just really powerful. And when you put yourself in powerful circumstances, then there's a lot of energy involved. And when you surf, if you surf waves, imagine in big waves, imagine the height and the volume of this building that we're in, this house. And imagine it's water. And now imagine you're at the front door and you're lying down on your stomach facing the street, and you look back over your shoulder, and the whole house, which is water, is about to come down on top of your head, and you're going, I'm going to catch you and ride you. And what happens is sometimes it does. It just crashes right down on your head. And then you go down underneath the surface of the water where it's very dark. And sometimes you lose track of which is up and which is down. And you could be down there for a long time. And it's easy to panic. It's easy to go, oh my goodness. And then all the stories that you've heard about some places where surfers have been held under for more than one wave. In other words, another wave comes before they get up to take a breath. And or one particular place where there's caves underneath in the coral, and they get caught in the cave, and then they don't know how to get out. And every year people drown surfing. It's scary. If you go skiing, the mountain doesn't move normally. There's an avalanche. That's something else. That's scary. But surfing, it's always moving. But I chose to surf, and I was scared. I was afraid a lot of the time. But you kind of get used to it. If you face your fears, if you go out there and master, when addressing the specific subject of public speaking, instead of saying, okay, avoid public speaking because it's scary to you, or only affirming, I can do this, which is not a bad thing to affirm, but he gave very practical advice about what to do in preparation for facing this fear. And one of those suggestions was prepare yourself properly. Take lessons in public speaking. Practice. So I practice surfing a lot, and you don't go out in the biggest waves in the beginning, you go out in small waves, and you build up. So if you have a fear of any kind, then it's a very good thing to experiment with. Prepare yourself. Do things, for example, another example, young men often fight. And as a young man, around other guys, guys would get into fights occasionally. And my father was a big, imposing person, and he used to let us have it occasionally. And so I was very afraid. Being in the presence of big guys made me uncomfortable because I didn't know what to do. And I had an opportunity at some point to train in the martial arts. And one of the reasons I did it was because I had this fear of being in the presence of other people who might injure me. And I had practiced meditation for quite a while when I did this martial arts training. So it wasn't the way it was when I was a kid, but still, and when I trained, it was interesting. I think one of the things that happened is that I realized, one, that my fear of being hit was unfounded. In other words, I got hit lots of times, and some of them I got injured, but it wasn't that bad. I mean, yeah, I got a bruise or whatever, but it's not like the people were trying to kill me, but the illusion that something swinging towards your head should be scary, or something that hit your body would in some way be terrible and destroy you, was unfounded. And this is true. Most of our fears are unfounded. If you're afraid of jumping off the side of a building without a parachute, that might be a well-founded fear. But many of the things that we're afraid of don't even happen. My mother used to be afraid that, she said, always keep the window up in your car and lock the doors while you're driving, just in case someone tries to attack you while you're driving. I mean, that was just like a crazy fear to me, but she had this in her mind. And another thing I did when surfing, a fellow told me about, he used to, when he wiped out on the wave and he's down underneath, he said he used to look up into the spiritual eye and just give himself to God. He said, hey, now what can go wrong? Nothing. And this is a key thing, is two things. One is that we do practical things to prepare. When I surfed in big waves, I was prepared. I was a strong swimmer. I knew the ocean. I knew where the waves were going to break. There was a lot of preparation. I didn't go out into places where I wasn't, confident that I could do it. Even though I was afraid, I still believed that I could do it. And there was a time when I was in the biggest waves that I was ever in. And I wiped out, I made it to the beach. I was pretty pleased that I survived, but I realized that I probably didn't want to go out in anything bigger than that, because that was right on the edge of my practical capabilities. And had I trained more, maybe I could have raised those capabilities. But you have to have a certain amount of common sense as well. Not assume that God is going to protect you when you haven't done completely your proper preparation. So one of the things to understand about the way that we relate to life, including fears that we may have, is that the central solution to all life circumstances lies within us. That the solution to fear, to worries, to nervousness, to any kind of instability outwardly is to find stability inwardly. And when we practice meditation, when we practice devotion, when we grow our inner awareness of the reality of spirit, then what's happening is we're transferring our sense of self, of safety, of well-being from the uncertain outwardness to certain inwardness. When we connect to God, when we connect to the peace and the love of universal consciousness, then we are connecting to that which is eternal. And the more aware we are of ourselves as spirit and not as body, ego, personalities, then we begin to trust that what can hurt this body? What can hurt me? What am I? If I think I'm the body and the ego, I can be hurt. But if I think I am the spirit, I am the soul, then I cannot be hurt. And even death itself, which is you would think it's the thing that people are most afraid of because it's the great unknown. People are afraid of things that they don't know. See, if you knew that you would survive embarrassment, and this is actually one of Kriyanandaji's suggestions for public speaking, imagine the worst. Well, and in fact, in public speaking, the worst is that people would think you're foolish. Okay, so accept it. They think and maybe I am. That's okay. That's not that. That doesn't kill me. Imagine a car accident and becoming injured. You'll probably survive, but if you don't, you'll survive anyway. But you survive in the world to come, not in this physical form. The soul is eternal. The soul cannot be killed. And this is our true reality. So when we live in a way that limits our sense of who we are, we enter into the limiting awareness of things like fear. And when we experience the raising of our consciousness, remember, as Patanjali describes, when you achieve ahimsa, even wild animals will be peaceful in your presence. And when we recognize that all of our life circumstances are determined by our state of consciousness, then we begin to realize that the adventure of life is our experience of it is a story that's created for us individually. And that our journey is meant to be interesting and exciting and challenging. And the most important part of that challenge is the spiritual challenge. And there's a great tradition of spiritual challenges. They're described as the dark night of the soul in some cases. That every great soul is tested to the maximum at some point. And they are required to face these tests and pass them. There's the story of Saint Anthony, who was in the desert, and he was in a tomb, and he was tempted by a beautiful woman. And then Satan, the voice of Satan, or the dark side, came to his mind and said, I'm going to crack the tomb, and all you have to do is deny Jesus. And he said, no, I will not give up my Christ. And the tomb began to shake and crack. And then in that moment, Jesus materialized to him. And Anthony said, where were you? And Jesus said, I was always with you. But he had faced that fear. And this challenge can come, Swamiji described a dream that he had. And in this dream, he was burned at the stake. And as you know, dreams can be quite real. I mean, I've had dreams that were so energetic that they woke me up. Some of them pleasantly energetic, but some of them were scary. Whoa! You know, I've had numerous dreams where I was in an earthquake and the building collapsed on me, it happened enough times that I began to recognize the dream, and then I would let myself go when the crush of the pancake thing happened. So one time I was visiting the Palo Alto community and staying in one of the apartments, and I had never stayed there before. And in the middle of the night, there was this rumbling, and California is known for earthquakes. So it started, you know, the whole room, I woke up and the room was like, and I thought, this is it. This is happening. And so instead of jumping up and running out the door to get out of the building, I just laid there, and it got rumbling louder and louder and louder, and the whole room was shaking. And then it rumbled on by. It was a train. There was a train track right next to the community, but I didn't know that. But it was actually a fabulous experience. And you know, to a surfer, the greatest fear is that you'll wipe out on a big wave. But when it happened and I survived it, it was the most thrilling thing. I mean, I was so excited that I lived. And of course, a lot of adrenaline junkies will tell you that you never feel more alive than you just almost died. But the thing is that when we live for the emotions, when we live in the emotions, then they lead us to these great swings of excitement and depression or fear. When we live in the soul, we develop even-mindedness. And this is the one of the great practical benefits of the practice of yoga, separate from communion with infinite spirit, is that you develop this even-mindedness in all circumstances, and you stop overreacting to everything, and you begin to feel a sense of well-being in all circumstances. I've mentioned in the past there was a time when I was confronting a neighbor who had a rifle in his hand, and you know, I'm standing there thinking, well, this guy has a gun. You know, if I make him mad, he might shoot me. But it was just interesting to watch. I remember a story of Ananda, who had a fellow come up to the door of his apartment and start to yell at him, and then I think I don't know whether he actually had the gun in his hand, but he threatened to shoot Ananda with a gun. And Ananda's reaction was, oh, okay. Completely different than, you know, the fear and paralyzing effect that has on our consciousness when we allow that. I also had another experience. I was in Hawaii as a young man surfing there, and the Hawaiians weren't always friendly to us surfers. And our greater than fear than drowning in the ocean was being attacked by a group of big Hawaiians and beaten up, maybe even killed. And so when we were on land, we were always very conscious, almost war zone consciousness, of avoiding groups of big burly Hawaiian guys, and especially at night. And one night we'd gone down to the beach to watch the sunset, and it had just gotten dark, and we were walking to the car, and a car came by and stopped just not very far from us, and we looked, and it was like the nightmare that you imagine in your dreams. The car, the doors all opened at the same time, 4 doors, and big Hawaiian guys started getting out. And they were so big and heavy that the car literally raised up. And we were like stuck for a moment, and then we walked really slowly to the other side of the car, and then we fortunately there was a trail that we knew right near there, and it was dark, but even still we went onto the trail and ran at full speed into the dark. And we were fairly used to walking in the dark at night, and there was light from the sky. We ran down this trail in absolute panic. I have to say, it was the most afraid I've ever been in my life. And we just ran down this trail, and then at one point we realized that we couldn't run forever. So we climbed up on the side of the trail, and we took our belts off and prepared to defend ourselves. And we just, sat there crouching in the dark, afraid. It was frightening. And they started yelling and threatening us, and we just sat there in panic. And then of course those guys were not going to come running up the trail in the dark. They didn't have flashlights, and they weren't crazy like us. I mean, we really ran down that trail, and eventually they went away, and we relaxed. And then suddenly, in the same position in which we were absolutely petrified, afraid, we noticed that the sky was really beautiful, and there was a pleasant breeze flowing up the hillside, and nature was all around, and we were alive, life was good. And again, you're never more alive than after you thought you were just about to die. And the thing is that those reactions to life, the way that we react to life, changes when we strengthen our inner sense of connection to spirit. And Master said that one of the signs of the yogi is that you can stand with an even mind amidst the crash of universes. This is really an astounding shift from the fragile, uncertain circumstances of sort of like the caveman around the dinosaurs, looking over your shoulder all the time, thinking you're going to be eaten, to being completely at peace in all circumstances. And this comes from proper preparation. This is a kind of training that most of us did not receive when we were growing up. We have to train ourselves. And you can work on, if you have individual fears, you can choose some of them and try to, maybe lesser ones, and try to conquer them through proper training and through acclimatizing yourself, like I did in surfing. Gradually, I did more and more and more. You don't do it all in one day. But the most comforting, the most strengthening thing that we can do is to find that peace inside of ourselves, in that center. And in that center, we'll find ourselves more and more confident of that peace, that protectiveness. And we saw over the years so many people coming close to disaster in their lives, but that God and Guru protected them. And I fell out of a tree from about 50 or 60 feet, and should have at least broken something. And I was really sore, but I was okay. And on the way down, instead of feeling fear, I felt peace. It was almost like I just relaxed completely, and I didn't choose to. My automatic reaction, and I perceive it as a blessing. I don't know for sure, but I felt that God was saying, "You're okay. Going to be okay." Because as I was going down, I was thinking, "You're too far up to be doing this. This is not a good idea." And then I hit, and I saw a big white light, and then I was just lying there. I wiggled my toes. They worked, so I figured I'll be okay. And I never felt anxiety about it. And this comes from meditation. It comes from spending time in peace and practicing it. And whenever you are tempted to feel anxiety of any kind, put your mind at the spiritual eye and open your heart to God's presence. And when we practice this, we begin to react towards peace. And one of the ways you can test yourself is when you're driving, you're in the car, and especially when you're a passenger and have no control of the situation. And when you come really close to having an accident, one of those times when you go, because it seems imminent, then where does your attention go? Well, often it goes outside, but try to practice going inside. So when you see cars coming close, practice it's coming close, Om Guru. Om Guru. And every time something agitates you, make it an automatic reaction, Om Guru. Or whatever you want to use, the words don't matter. Connect, inwardly connect to spirit. And when you make a practice of your number one reaction to all life circumstances is to inwardly connect if you're not already feeling that connection. And if you are feeling it, increase it. And being in God's presence is a conscious act. When we consciously connect in that way, then we make that our number one habit of being inwardly connected to spirit. Then from that sense of well-being will come all of the practical solutions that we need, even if the ultimate happens and the solution is to relax into spirit, into the next incarnation, to the next stage of the journey. So I want to close by reading in Master's writings, you'll find so many practical solutions to every life challenge. And in his prayer demands, he often will put within the spiritual solution of the affirmation, and it is information about how to deal with that circumstance in a very practical way. And here's the demand to be able to conquer fear. Infinite Spirit, teach me to comprehend the utter uselessness of being afraid. Help me to remember that death, if it must come, does not come twice, and that when it does occur, through the mercifulness of nature, I shall not know of it nor care. Thus, I need not tremble at the thought of death. Teach me not to paralyze my nerves by the dread of any imagined accident, and thus invite it to happen in reality. Bless me that I do not through fear anesthetize my unlimited power as thy child to overcome the tests and trials of life. Make me know that whether I am awake or asleep, alert or dreaming, thine all-protecting presence encircles me. Make me feel that though I may be in a strong man-made castle and clad in armor, I am vulnerable to disease, earthquake, and accident if I am without thee. But that though I walk where bullets fly or bacteria abound, I am protected behind the battlements of everlasting safety if thou art with me. So God's presence in our consciousness, in our hearts, is the solution to all challenges, including fear. Namaste.